And so I went in and I recanted the story just as I told you. And I said, so where do I get my last paycheck? And I want to share a story with you that happened to me a number of years ago as it pertains to CRM, something that we weren't really talking about that much back in those days. So I was roughly 21, 22-ish at that time, and was flying right seat on a King Air. The left seater I was flying with in this corporate operation was an ex-hurricane hunter out of the military, right? So tons of experience. He had flown everything from the big round engines to the turboprops to, even the jets, if you will. And he was more of a sit down, shut up, don't touch anything type captain. So it was a little intimidating to fly with him the first couple of flights, of course, because I didn't know what I was allowed to do and what I wasn't allowed to do. But over the course of 3 months, I was allowed to finally start talking on the radio. That's all I was allowed to touch was the microphone, and occasionally get to put the gear handle up or down and maybe set the altitude pre-selector. On this particular flight, we were coming out of Detroit. There was a snow squall coming through. And so we were getting blanketed with wet snow and didn't really pick up a lot of ice on the climb out because it was just wet snow. So it wasn't really doing a whole lot of adhering to the aircraft. However, it was a snow squall, so there was basically thunderstorms or thunder snow, as they like to say. And we were deviating around this, trying to make our way out. And I was working the radios, and he had his hands full because he was adamant he was going to hand fly this weather and single pilot it kind of deal. And I was allowed to receive the clearances and the altitude and heading assignments. And so I distinctly remember the heading and the altitude assignment, and they were King Air blankety blankety blank. Turn to a heading of 230, climb and maintain flight level 200. Okay, so we've got two numbers that are very close in proximity. One is a heading, one is an altitude. As I'm reading it back to him, I'm setting the altitude. So I had the 200 set in there. And he did not want to take the turn. So as I'm reading back, he's telling me verbally, we can't take that heading, ask him for something a little more south. So as I'm reading back the 200, I said, we're unable the heading of 230. Can we go maybe 180 for 10 miles for weather? And the controller says, approved as requested type deal. Once I'm off the radio, he then insisted that the altitude assignment was 230. And I assured him, no, I'm pretty sure I read it back correctly. It was 200. Had I read the incorrect altitude, he would have corrected me on it. And he said, not so much. It was 230. You need to change pre-selector. And I said, well, how about let's just do this. How about I just key the mic and let's call him up and ask what the altitude assignment was. It's cheap insurance. And he informed me that it was too busy, with a few explicitives, to be aggravating the controller with such minuscule request. We should know what our assignments were, and that this was the assignment. He heard it, and that's what I needed to set in the pre-selector. And if I couldn't follow instructions, maybe I needed to look into a different position. So I reluctantly set 230 in the pre-selector, and then I sat back and waited. At approximately 400 feet past our assigned altitude of 200, the controller came on in a very hasty fashion and indicated to us that our assignment was 200, and he showed us climbing through that, say, altitude. The response from the left seat was immediate throttles idle, nose forward, and another explicitive as he pushed the aircraft over to stop the climb. The passengers, who were not seated very well in the back, got to go on a zero-G experience for just a few minutes, or a few seconds, I should say, along with their drinks, which they now wore instead of were holding in their cups. And we leveled off and stated we were level. The controller says, okay, well, check your transponder, check your altimeter, et cetera, et cetera. And then we continued on without further ado or event. However, through the remainder of the flight, of course, you can imagine the steely looks coming from the left side of the aircraft at me as if I had done something wrong. So I finally relinquished all duties and said, you know what, you got it. Okay, I'll see you when we get there. And considered exiting the cockpit since it was a single pilot airplane to begin with. But nonetheless, I stayed for the remainder of the flight. For aesthetics, if nothing else. Upon arrival, we had a short discussion about it, and the following day at 8:30 a.m., I got a phone call from the boss, not the left seater, but the boss, and he asked me to come in to discuss the prior night's flight because he was in the back of the airplane when it happened. And so I went in and I recanted the story just as I told you, and I said, "So where do I get my last paycheck?" Because I was sure that I was getting fired over this, right? And he said, no, you're not fired. We fired the other guy. And until we can find another pilot for you to fly with, you're on leave, paid, until that time. So I got a nice little 2-week paid vacation while they found another pilot to come fly with me in the King Air. So that's my CRM story.